to the fall 2024 virtual open house for the SMArchS-Urbanism. And my name is Rania Ghassan. I'm an associate professor of architecture and urbanism and the incoming director of the SMArchS-Urbanism program as of January 2025. So I wanted to take a few moments to share a few notes about the program that has been running for many decades between sitting within architecture and in close collaboration with the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at MIT. It's a design research focused program in urbanism that addresses key concerns of contemporary urbanism to prepare graduate students for positions of responsibility in organizations and institutions that shape the urban environment and within a range of scales. So we're supported by an excellent and internationally recognized faculty, a curriculum that addresses pressing contemporary urban concerns, a setup of a research university that is supported by a series of research lab and grant opportunities. So a quick description of the program. As I mentioned, this is interested in the next generation of urban thinkers that foreground their own approach to a method of design research and practice. So with that objective in mind, we approach urbanism within an expanded framework beyond the conventional framework of the city. So all students are invited to critically interrogate the field. Where is the urban, we say? What are some definitions, sites and scales, matters of concerns, methods and media, and ultimately values that each alum will engage. So we examine these not only as a question of form, but also as a question of process, and one that expands from the molecular scale to the planetary scale. So it's an inherently transscalar approach to the question of urbanism, always with an attention to both the relationship between the land form and the life form. So the question of what livable world one is supporting is at the core of this research. The degree requirements span over 4 semesters or 2 full academic years, and they're structured to reinforce this design research pedagogy in urbanism, which culminates in a year-long thesis. So we understand it as 2 rounds around the sun. The first year of the program provides the strong foundation with a required sequence of seminars on urban design research, histories, methods, and theories, and a studio that opens up that space of experimentation on speculation of how things might be otherwise. In the second year of the program, you initiate a similar process around your master's thesis, where you identify an urban matter of concern, of course, with the support and supervision of a faculty member, and you produce your own piece of design research. You're supported by a group of faculty that either strictly sit within the SMArchS-Urbanism teaching group or in the broader A+U arm, as well as I mentioned, within faculty, within close alliance, within the City Design and Development group in DUSP. So you can see some of the research that covers, from computation to ecology, migrations, questions of data, and the various processes of cities' rise and decline. I'll quickly go through the faculty member. You can find their detailed profile. Miho Mazarao, an associate professor and director of the Urban Lisp Lab, which focuses on the anticipation of disasters. Rafi Siegel, the current program director, who leads an international design operation, here recently winning a project in Pristina, Kosovo, to convert an empty brick factory building and renovate it as a center of public life. Rosalind Xie, an assistant professor, an architect and educator. So she both teaches the thesis prep methods, has her own design practice from Xie, and is interested in the intersection of material culture, oral history, and post-colonial identity in Taiwan, as well as the director of the Architecture and Urbanism Design Group, which responds to how urban design has long served as a tool of white supremacy here by exploring Black settlements in LA, and particularly to recognize forms of history that are our history, not only of sorrow, but also that of joy and making. And myself, Rania Ghassan, a partner of the practice Design Earth, and I teach at MIT a series of required and option courses, including Landscapes of Energy, which I'm happy to tell you more later about, and then the Proseminar, which gets us straight to the question of the Proseminar. It's the first required course of all incoming SMArchS-Urbanism. It's also open for MArch students and many other students join us from both this campus and other campuses. We ask, where is the urban? So we foreground a place-based approach to design research. It's not a typology, it's not an abstract concern, it's always situated, and it's often situated in places that students care about to research. Often the research that starts in the Proseminar continues with the students to become some of what they're working on in their own thesis projects. And it's both a reading heavy and a drawing based course whereby we call it a design research method that foregrounds both visual and textual research. And you'll see how kind of we started with that question of a research that approaches across scale. Here you're looking at a typical food, rice, that might be consumed widely, but then beginning to situate it within specific geographies and shifting concerns of climate change and drought and urban settlements. Here, starting from the kind of the famous Parasite movie, looking at the semi-basement dwelling known as Pangaea in Korea, the longer history of environmental histories that have occupied pressures of real estate that made such units profitable, rising concerns of climate change and what to do about that. Questions of migration, not least from Central America up north here, looking at La Bestia, which is a cargo train network that connects the southern and northern borders of Mexico, which makes it both an important node for the economy, but also a route of informal migration. And here, Melissa Soto looked at the various forms of solidarity between settlements along the route of the Bestia and the traveling migrants. And by also looking at the thickness or the section of the earth, looking here at hydropolitical water cycles and their conversions in questions to pollution and embodied public health. So kind of really reconciling the body of the planet and the body of each human being. Some of this research, even if done in the SMArchS course, ends up being published work. So here a piece by Bella Carmelita Kaiker, who's published her work, Slow Violence in Post 9/11 New York, in the Avery Review and won the essay prize for that year. And I'm happy to share more examples. A studio is a core component of the SMArchS-Urbanism pedagogy. It can be offered in the fall semester or in the spring semester, but it provides an opportunity to engage in urban issues through design thinking, often in modes of thoughtful collaborations in contexts that are both local and international. So students participate in at least one studio during their degree program at MIT. I'll give you one example, a studio taught in 2017, titled Urbanism After Extraction, which looks at the relationship between housing, landscape, and infrastructure in Poland, taught by Professors Rafi Siegel and Mary-Lo Adams. So it looked at various post-industrial transformation in this former mining region in Poland, including a site visit to the Guido mine in Zabry, Poland, whereby students experienced these cramped tunnels of early coal mining methods. There are various landscapes of Silesia, partially active coal mines, and then a series of collaborative design proposals in groups of 3 or 4 students. Here, for example, developing a narrative around a traditional Miners' Day festival in the region, or by looking at a region which is historically covered by forest, around 30%, and trying to imagine how, after being degraded over several decades by pollution and industry, one can begin to rethink the conceptual framework of a civic forest through a series of cultural programming around a large community table, and that ends up with this map that inscribes over protective gloves the landscape of the broader region, kind of mediating the larger scale of contamination and the forms of encounter, embodied encounter with the lands, and new forms of inhabitation and possibly even leisure. Some studios are also based specifically in Boston, such as a studio taught by Professor Miho Mazerau and Marianne Ocampo in East Boston, and that focuses in particularly on the development of what was the kind of the instigator of the climate core that I'll tell you a bit more about, looking at community and resilience at the local level through a kind of a joint urban design studio here in collaboration with the city design and development to create a framework that responds to various community needs, builds off on the waterfronts, the increasing concerns of climate change and gentrification as it impacts a region historically the landing grounds for migrants, and more recently part of the larger development framework of the city of Boston. So students can choose to continue to be engaged in East Boston, not least through a collaboration that was launched by Mayor Michelle Wu as part of her vision for the Boston Green New Deal, and in which MIT is developing a broader urban climate core that intends to connect environmental justice with community-grounded actions. So these studios have their kind of parallel in a series of workshops, which are somewhere between a seminar and a kind of a studio, often highly collaborative and involving a travel destination. Some of this travel is supported directly by these studios, and others are made possible by MISTI, which is a specific body at MIT that supports MIT students' experience around the world to tackle challenges that might be specific to their thesis, to prepare for broader questions of service and impact. So you might have briefly heard about it in the morning, but this was launched in 1987. So it's a joint urban design studio and one of the longest running academic engagement between the US and China. This is in collaboration with Tsinghua University. And students have looked at various forms of decommissioning industrial warehouses into new cultural hubs. Professor Miho Mazerao has also led a series of workshops looking at pre-disaster preparedness here in Nepal. The Liminal Workshop Lab, launched by a former SMArchS alum in collaboration with faculty members, and looking at Monte Prestini in Italy, 45 minutes from Rome, but a whole world apart, the question of the shrinking cities and populations in Italy, and looking at how to begin to reanimate such literacy, getting to know the stakeholders, forms of agritourism, and a series of initiatives and local businesses. And also with support from the MIT Leventhal Center for Advanced Urbanism, as well as MIT Africa. Students here, with the supervision of Professor Ravi Siegel, have built a model village in Rwanda as part of 2 weeks that were spent on site and kind of developing that brick module that you'll see here. An intense design build operation in which masons and students actually built these mock-ups of breeze walls that integrated reinforced concrete columns and custom connection detail. So I'll just wrap up with a few words on Thesis in 2 ways. One is that 2 points actually that I want to reinforce. One is that the flexible curriculum of the SMArchS-Urbanism program allows students to explore diverse research tracks and opportunities. So you can customize your coursework to best support your thesis, both within and beyond the school. In relationship to faculty-led labs and researchers that integrate many SMArchS students as a researcher in their ongoing investigation, and on a series of themes of climate change, infrastructure, geodesign, risk and equitable resilience, race, migration, energy systems, digital urbanism, housing, transmedia storytelling, and more broadly, future forms of living together. So that's why you're here. For many students, the design thesis is also a stomping ground for issues they continue to be investigating after they complete their thesis. So I'll share just quickly a few of these theses that were recently completed, not to kind of limit the opportunity, but to give you a sense of the synergies that students were able to generate while completing their thesis. So Gabriella De Gatto-Zanders had looked at landscapes of energy, taken the course, engaged a series of initiatives across DUSP, looking particularly at Amazonia, and did her research on the afterlife of wells when the Ecuadorian state begins to decommission a large swath of these mining operations and kind of particularly oil operations. And you can kind of see the variety of research methods, kind of speculative, analytical, ethnographic, that Gabriella conducted, all through these forms of dialogue to begin to transform the afterlife of the well into strategies that could begin to advocate for territorial reparation, coexistence, and ecological conservation. recently, Chang completed a thesis on the exploration of Taiwanese life through this idea of the constant dampness and a various series of personal and historical memories of home and motherhood, and kind of his own specific research interest as it culminated in his thesis book, also threaded a collaborative exhibition that he worked on with Ina Wu and Ray Wang, titled Damp Skin, the Porous Urbanity and Individual, which was presented at the Wisner Student Art Gallery with support from the arts at MIT. So there's various opportunities whereby students both begin to create collaborations, but also make public their work, both within MIT and more broadly. Also recently, Brian Wong completed a thesis on exorcising the haunted city, quite on theme for Halloween later this week, but it's more seriously, it looks at the looming threat of cultural erasure by Hong Kong's repatriation to China no later than 2047, and the series of rituals that emerge as the last resource to sustain the collective identity of the city, an exploration carried through drawings, writings, model making, and kind of temporal-based animations. And also in collaboration with Nami Kun, the name of the collaboration is On Me. They had an exhibition titled Balconies at the MIT Roach Library, again with support from the Council for the Arts at MIT. I'll just share a couple of other examples on Pramada Jagtap's thesis on global water-based displacement, particularly here looking at Pune, India, and Subbu Bandari's thesis on unsettling roads, the increase in dust and landslide because of land erosions and climate change in the context of Nepal. So taking in particularly the question of road building and weaving in grandfather's history, the father's translation, and her own inserted narrative on her own experience of her hometown. What do students do meanwhile and after? Well, some students, like Larissa Ovales, continue to be long-term collaborators in the Urban Risk Lab based here at Cambridge. Other, like Bob Wangtanapan, is based in Bangkok, Indonesia, but continues to collaborate in points and is kind of developing a series of prototypes as part of the larger work of the BOSAI Plus websites, so a series of wearables and industrial scale applications of broader urban frameworks. Giovanni Bellotti, whose thesis looked at the relationships between birds and humans, or what he called the design of the encounters, as you can imagine, grounded in post-human ecologies and focusing on the presence of animals in the life of this earth, has continued to start a collaboration, an award-winning practice by the Demo Studio Ossidiana, based in Italy, led by himself and Alessandra Covini. And here, one of their earlier projects, the Bird's Palace. So it's sometimes almost a literal continuation of interest of a floating garden that here anchors a transformed version of what a truly public urban space can be. So weaving in bird watchers, a series of bird ecologies over a temporary flower field. Some faculty members, of course, because of the presence of computing at MIT, look at various forms of new technologies. Here, looking at the relationship between new technologies and new toys, not least video games, virtual worlds, and avatars. And Alina Nazmiva, who's completed that thesis, is now an educator based at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where she also practices as a media artist. Gabriel Kozlowski's thesis on the sprawl in the city of Mexico and his own earlier training from Brazil were supported his research and design contribution to the Venice Biennale, where he was one of the curators of the Brazilian pavilion's Walls of Air, that is organized by this interdisciplinary transscalar framework that maps both the built and the unbuilt. And also while at MIT, Gabriel was a curator of the LCU exhibition on housing as a global phenomenon, and with the kind of a worldview of equity as a governing concern. You'll hear later in the afternoon from Barrett on the multiple research opportunities at LCAU, research and travel opportunities at LCAU. So connect back again for the LCAU session. So again, this is by no way kind of a limiting of who our alums are, but I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the faces that have graduated over the past few years, the geographies that they moved to, the various institutions that they're collaborating with or situated within. And it's a large network, but it's also a small number of students. So we take around 8 students per year, which allows this almost intimate scale table dining gathering and a very one-on-one individual relationship with faculty member, which can be tremendously supportive, specifically in the context of a program that is thesis focused. So I'll just wrap up the introductory notes here. Yeah, and maybe also stop the recording.